Hi, I'm Pat O'Toole. I'm Editorial Director for Professional Builder, Professional Remodeler, and HousingZone.com. And with me today are Dave Barista, Editor-in-Chief of Professional Builder, and Jonathan Sweet, Editor-in-Chief of Professional Remodeler. And we're here to tell you what we're following in the week ahead. First comes to mind is the new construction side of the market, which is expected to grow 10 to 20% this year. Some of the more bullish estimates are 700,000 units for 2011, and the downside is flat at 565 or so. But what we're seeing is early sales traffic through new home construction models that suggest there is an increase in the offing. And the next several weeks up until March, end of March, will be very telling in terms of hitting those more bullish estimates. But there is some confident sentiment among builders in Washington, D.C., Denver, Charlotte, and parts of the southeast Florida. Tougher markets naturally are Detroit, Fresno, Sacramento, Chicago, surprisingly. And so there's a lot of regionality to the numbers that we're seeing. In addition to all of this new construction activity, there's a political landscape that's happening. We're seeing GSE reform out there. We're seeing oil prices go up, so fuel is a negative pressure. And then on the higher side of things, job growth is finally happening, and we're seeing less than 9% unemployment in the market right now. So these are things that you'll see on HousingZone.com this week. I'm going to hand it off to Dave Barista. Dave, you've got a couple of things cooking, in particular a land development survey that we conducted in January. Can you give us a little more details on that?
Sure, yeah. Posting this week on Housing Zone is our full report. Basically in January, late January, we did a survey with professional builder readers. We had about 300 respondents, and we asked them, is it a great time to buy land? Right. Is it the time to be in the market for land? And about 55% came back and said, yes, it is a great time. The issue is only about a quarter actually purchased land within the past 12 months, and only about a third said they plan to buy land sometime this year.
Is that a lack of cash, lack of loans? What is the reason given? Were you able to see that?
Yeah, it's definitely all about the money. It's difficulty in obtaining financing. They're concerned about home buyer demand in their market, and also having projects pencil out based on the current land price.
Great. So what other stories are you following this week, Dave?
Sure, you mentioned job growth as a big plus, and a report's going to come out later this week from the National Federation of Independent Business, and it's expected to show positive job growth, especially among small businesses, which bodes well for our market. Right. And also the University of Michigan will release their Consumer Sentiment Index. It's expected to be somewhat flat, but still trending more positive within the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah, consumer sentiment is a huge factor in all this. I mean, some estimates out there really pivot heavily on that consumer sentiment amount that's out there in the market. And if consumer sentiment gets rolling, then the recovery could happen faster. And as we kind of shift gears a little bit on the remodeling side, we've heard the kitchen and bath activity is really driving the remodeling market in particular. And Jonathan, I know you're following some political events this week that are going to be really important for remodelers and builders this week. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. One of the biggest is what's going on with 1099 repeal. If you don't remember, last year, as part of healthcare reform, there was a segment of the bill that had to do with stricter reporting requirements on 1099s. If you want to find out the details about that, go to housingzone.com. We've covered it a lot. But the important thing is that a lot of the associations, NARI, NAHB, the Chamber of Commerce have been trying to get this repealed. And the good news is that the House did pass the repeal bill on Friday, following one the Senate passed about 2 weeks ago. The bad news is they passed two different bills. They can't agree how to pay for it. And so there's still there's progress, but it's not an end result that everyone's been hoping for yet.
That's great news, right? Because small builders and small remodelers have been really focused on the extra paperwork involved in 1099s, and it could put a lot of guys under, frankly, with all the extra work required, correct?
Well, right. There's a lot of extra paperwork because it's any person or company you spend more than $600 with, you'd have to fill out a 1099 for, which is a much stricter requirement than currently in place. It's an effort to address to collect some extra revenue.
Right, and then there's something happening on mortgage interest deductions too, right?
Well, actually, it's on the mortgage modifications, and what's going on there is that the state's attorneys general issued a basically a paper, a 27-page paper that they delivered to the 5 major banks last week, and outlined several things they want to see the banks do as part of mortgage reform. And what they want to do, the biggest have to do with modifying mortgages.
I gotcha.
And the 2 major points out of that are that they would, if someone is in the process of trying to modify their mortgage, banks would not be able to foreclose on them.
I gotcha.
And the second part of it is that if you've gone into a trial modification and you've been successful in that trial modification, they would have to give you a permanent modification, which banks are currently not required to do. So on the positive side, it keeps people in their homes longer, which is a good thing. People can afford their homes. The negative side, opponents say it could drag out the housing recovery as it would keep those foreclosures off the market. Kind of a question of, do we peel the Band-Aid off now, or do we stretch it out?
Great, great. So the housing market is slowly, gradually recovering, both remodeling and new construction. So go to housingzone.com all this week for those types of stories. For Dave Barista, Jonathan Sweet, I'm Pat O'Toole. Go to housingzone.com and look for these stories this week.